Come, Holy Spirit, fill the hearts of your faithful and kindle in us the fire of your love. Amen. It's hard to know where to start, but I think I'm going to start with Carole's beginning here. Because she came in and we saw her name was spelled Carole with an E, but she didn't say like she usually does, "Hi, I'm Carole with an E." We said, "Well, how do you pronounce that? Is it Carole or Carole?" And she says, "Oh, it's Carole." And she let us call her that for a very long time. And when I finally started visiting her at the house, and I said, "So really, is it Carole or Carole?" She's like, "Oh, it's Carole." And I said, "Well, I'll get it straightened out with Margaret. Because she always calls you Carole." And she says, "Oh, no, don't tell her." She says, "I love to hear her when I come in say, 'Carole, Carole.'" So that's how Carole has been known here. She's been our Carole. And it sounded kind of Haitian, so it's like we went with it. Later we found out, no, it really was Carole with an E. But I love that about her, that she had that kind of sense of humor. Even in the face of cancer, I never saw her lose her sense of humor. I never saw her lose her joy. Every time I would go to see her, except the very last day when she was no longer talking, she would say, "This is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it." Even when she was laying there fighting this dreaded disease that she got 4 years out of when they told her she'd get 1 because she had that aggressive kind of breast cancer. And when first diagnosed her, they gave her a year. Well, they didn't know Carole Chataigne. And she showed them all. They called her at her chemo, where she went to get her chemo treatments and everything. They called her the woman of faith. Because she just didn't give up. She wasn't taking that diagnosis and giving up and checking out in a year. It wasn't going to happen. And she had such faith. And I go and I have a little booklet with prayers and scriptures and stuff when I go and visit people and bring communion. And we'd flip to the back of the book where I have supplemental scriptures. She would want to read mostly all the scriptures before we ever even started the communion service. So Duke would sit there with us and we'd go through. We'd read all these readings that were precious to her. And she would always want the one about James, where whoever's sick, lay hands on them and anoint them. And the prayers of a righteous person are powerful and effective. And we would sing that and read that. And then she would have me anoint her. And I'd anoint her head. And then she'd hold out her hands. And then later the neuropathy got bad in her feet, and I would anoint her hands and her feet, and we would pray. And it was powerful, because I really believe in the power of sacraments, but so did she. And it didn't heal her, not in the way we wanted to. I think sometimes God heals people by giving them a new body and getting them out of the cancer-racked, disease-racked body that they've been living in for a while. But it gave her such strength. And if I ever texted her and said, "Hey, I got time this afternoon. Would you like me to come by?" "Oh, come. Bring communion." Yes. She's always happy to have communion. And other friends visited. I mean, the house had like a revolving door in the last weeks. People bringing food, Amazon packages coming. They were so well loved and cared for. And I think that's because what goes around comes around. And Carole spent her life loving people. And in the end, when she needed people, they were there. Catherine bringing harps, bringing a harp and playing, people bringing food, people sending. One of Melissa's friends sent like warm fuzzy socks and massage oils and stuff. I mean, just thoughtful things that people were thinking of. If I was in this place, what would I want? And so her faith served her well, because she had 3 Christian communities. I'm not sure which the other church is. She had the Catholic Church, she had us, and there was a third. Did you ever figure out what the third one was? Yeah.
St. Mary's in Huntley.
Oh, St. Mary's in Huntley. So 2 Catholic churches.
Yes.
She was well churched.
Actually,
4.
there's St. Thomas in Naperville.
And St. Thomas in Naperville.
Resurrection.
So y'all, don't tell me you don't have time to come to church on Sunday. Because Carole made time to be in 4 churches and probably a few different choirs. And I mean, she was in our praise band here and just loved the Lord. And one of the last times she came back, one of the nurses she worked with, her son was being baptized. And Carole had been out at the trailer. And she drove in and surprised all of us to be here for that baptism. And, and of course, Melinda called her Mama Carole, as many of the nurses do. I think she was Mama Carole to the world, and she started young. No one should be raising kids at 13, but sometimes that's how the world is. And she stood up and rose to the occasion and did it well. I've met a lot of the brothers. They were well raised. And she did a pretty good job with her girls too. And Jenny died by suicide a few years back, and it was a source of pain for all of you. And Duke and I and Carol, we'd sit and talk about it. And I'd tell them it's okay to be mad at God. There's plenty of things in this life we don't understand. When you start losing family members, be it cancer or suicide, or they get killed in a car accident, it's always hard to say goodbye. We're not built for goodbye. We're built for hello. Hi, I'm Carole Lee. We're built for that. We have to start saying goodbye. That's tough. But I always say, we couldn't, all the people that were ever born, this planet couldn't sustain us all. We weren't meant for eternity in this world. We're meant for eternity with God and God's kingdom, which is far more expansive than, it says in Scripture, no eye has seen, no mind has perceived what God has prepared for us in Christ Jesus. We get glimpses, like the gospel I just read. Jesus said, don't let your hearts be troubled. Believe in me. In my Father's house there are many dwelling places, and I go and prepare a place for you. I can just see Carol kind of rearranging her room and finding some flowers to put in it. And, she was always happy if people brought over flowers. She loved beauty. And I can just see her enjoying the beauty of this amazing world that she has now entered. I always like to talk about what the saints wrote about. It's like there's thin spaces between this world and the next. And there may be times you sense Carol still with you. It's because we're still present to each other in God's love. God's love is eternal. And love never dies. And so when someone we love dies, their love doesn't die. They're just loving us from the other side. And you can't hug them. It's not the same. But they're still there. And their love is still there. And I'm quite sure she's still praying for you. Now she's got Jesus right at her disposal. I'm sure she will be bending his ear big time. And I'm sure she's reuniting. It's just been this party. While we're all sad, we gather, and it feels a little like when a baby's born, when someone's dying, because the family gathers around and everybody. And I like to imagine that heaven is kind of like that welcoming. Like nobody's crying up in heaven when they're getting ready for somebody to come home. They're like, oh, Carol's coming home. Let's have a party. I like to think her parents were there, and her sister, and Jenny. She was greeted so quickly. And I think it was hard for her to die because she hated to leave the love that was with her. And I finally said, I've heard stories where people are with their loved ones for hours, days. And when they finally walk out of the room, the person dies. And the hospice nurses said, that's true. And so Duke went down to make a sandwich. And we'd been with her all day. They'd called me in the morning. I'd come down. I'm massaging her feet. Duke's holding her hand. Melissa was curled up in bed with her, loving on her. And I think it was just too hard to exit at that point. But when they left the room, they came back and she was gone. And I think it's hard for us to let go of the life we know, for that untangible hope and promise of the life to come. And Carol knew what was coming. And she had no worries about where she was going. She knew. And even in the end, that last week, she was ready for last rites. And we did it. And we did it again that day because she wasn't dying. And we thought, well, maybe we need to do this last rites thing again and just pray. And maybe she'll hear us saying it's okay to go. And it is. And it's sad. And I have to differ with Melissa a little. She spoke at the wake quite eloquently on, was that Saturday night, Friday night? When was it? Friday night. And she's like, no tears. We're not crying. Because my mom would just be like, pull yourself up and keep going. But I'm the priest and I'm the pastor. And I say, you know what? If you got to cry, it's okay. All our tears show is that somebody mattered to us. Tears are the love that leaks out our eyes when we can't hug on the people we love. And it doesn't mean anything bad. You know, it says in the Bible that the Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. So if you need to cry, cry. If you need to laugh, laugh. If you need to get busy, get busy. We all grieve in our own different ways. And there's no wrong way to grieve. And we can grieve many different ways in the course of a day. You know, we might decide, we might just get supercharged and clean the house, and then we might collapse and sleep for hours. Or we might want to talk to a friend, and we'll tell story after story about the person we lost. Or we might not feel like saying a word. And none of it is wrong. My husband, the astute, spiritually minded person that he is in his own way, observed my family while my mom was dying, and he said, you know, everybody has to deal with these losses in their own way. And they don't all jive together real well. But then he said, and nobody's wrong. It's like each person does what they need to do. And what I tell families, respect each other. Give each other the space that you need. Give each other the hugs when you need them. Pass the Kleenex when the tears come. Share the stories and the laughs. There are so many funny stories about Carole. And joyous stories. I mean, Jean was telling Duke one before church started. Her granddaughter was trained. Carole was her, what do you call it, Jean? A preceptor? When Miranda was studying to be a nurse, and she's up at Mayo now. But when she came in and saw Carole in church one day, it was a ruckus. Would that be fair to say? Just squeals of glee at reuniting. She was a wonderful mom, nurse, mentor, beloved child of God. She just did it all well. I don't know what she didn't do well. She was just one of these people that lived life large. Larger than I probably ever will. But she inspired me. Her entire time she was sick, I never heard her complain once. Not once. Never heard her ask, why me? What I heard from her over and over and over was, this is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. She just had such strong faith. And she told me a couple songs and things she wanted for her funeral. She didn't really want to talk about it a lot. Melissa said she wasn't a big long-range planner. She's like, we'll see. That's okay. I had a couple that I knew she wanted, and we made sure to put them in the service. That one we just sang, Jesus be the center. Jesus was the center of Carole's life. And the Lamentations read, the steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies are new every morning. She greeted God every day, just waiting to see what new thing he had for her. Every day. I can only think of one person I've known with that kind of joy besides Carole. Just that unstoppable, unflappable, no matter what happens and no matter what sorrows and griefs flew in her face, joy came. I have a saying, my priest in college gave me a little plaque, and it says, joy is not the absence of suffering, but the presence of the Lord. And I think that's why Carole was such a joyful person. She always had God present. God was never out of her mind or out of her heart. She just walked so closely with Jesus that the joy spilled out. And I hope that's one of the gifts that you can take from Carole. That you can just keep walking with Jesus, and it's okay if you're walking sad. Jesus wept at the grave of Lazarus because he felt bad that his friend had died. And he knew he was going to bring him back from the dead, and he still stood there and cried. He knew what the outcome was. It's sad to say goodbye. It is. I feel so sad to not be able to see her back in the praise band anymore, or to hear that this is the day the Lord, or let's read all the scriptures. Let's come back here and start with James, and then we just go through them all. That is a heart and soul I will miss. But like I said, she is gone from our sight. There's a reading I often share, and I didn't think to stick it in my notebook, but I'm going to do my best. It tells a story about a ship that set sail. And there were people on the shore standing by and waving as the ship took off. And at one point, the ship just kind of melted into the horizon where it just kind of mingled in with the clouds in the sky and disappeared. And at that moment, someone looked up and said, there, she's gone. But gone where? Gone from our sight, that is all. She is just as big in hull and spar and just as able to carry her freight to the load of her destination. And that's Carole. She is just as alive as she ever was. Just like that ship. At the same time that ship passed out of their sight, then there were others on the other shore saying, there she comes. And that's dying. I know they were partying in heaven when they saw her come home. Think of those that have missed her for years, her sister and her daughter and her parents, and that haven't seen her for years. Can you imagine that homecoming and that grieving? And that's the promise we have in Jesus. That He defeated death. He is the resurrection and the life. And death is not the end of the story. It's a pause. It's an end of our life in this world. But we go on to live forever with Jesus. And I just can't even imagine. For as joyful as she was here, her in heaven, in the face of God, that's going to be like joy on steroids. I mean, there is going to be no stopping her joy. I mean, you couldn't stop her joy in this world in the midst of a 4-year battle with cancer. Can you imagine her in a brand new, disease-free body in the face of her Lord? That's the image I hang on to. When I lose someone, that's what I think of. I imagine them with Jesus. And it doesn't make me miss them any less. But it brings me a little solace to think about the joy they're having. And I know you wouldn't bring her back to that pain and suffering. I mean, it'd be nice to have her back, but in that shape, no. I'd much rather think of her with Jesus in her brand new body. But be gentle with each other, because like I said, grief is not a short trip, it's a marathon. And just take it a day at a time, a step at a time, and just keep loving on each other. Keep sharing the memories, keep sharing the joy, because she will always be in your heart where God's love lives. Amen.